Hey, it's Lindsay, branch manager here at Applied Mortgage. I want to dive into a spring housing update here in 2022. It has definitely been an interesting time in the housing market, and things just keep getting a little bit more uncertain. So let's look at some data together and create some certainty here so that we can all be educated and informed as we're entering or still a part of this housing market this year. So we're going to start with just some basic supply and demand and looking at our housing inventory here in part one. Supply and demand is really what drives the market. So let's just look at this basic supply and demand example here. Let's say we have some apples, right? And we have some people who want to buy the apples. So in our first scenario, we have 8 apples here, and we have 6 people that want to buy the apples. Now, if we're comparing this to a housing market, you hear people talk about a buyer's market versus a seller's market. What does that actually mean? So in our first example, this would be a buyer's market because there are plenty of apples to go around for all the buyers. There's actually a little bit of extra apples. Nobody's going to have to fight over the apples, right? So what's a seller's market? You hear people talking about a seller's market right now. A seller's market means that there are less apples or less houses than there are people to buy that product. So in this case, we have 8 apples and we have 10 buyers. That means that some of the buyers are going to have to be negotiating over the apples, and not every person is going to get an apple. So that's, in the housing world, a seller's market. It means that as the seller, you have a little bit more control because you have a good that people want and there's a higher demand for that good. So in the housing market right now, what's been going on? Well, being in a seller's market means that there's less than 6 months supply of houses on the market. That means if every single buyer were to go out and buy a house, the houses would run completely up within 6 months. A neutral market is 6 to 7 months of inventory, and a buyer's market is having greater than 7 months of inventory. So that's kind of the general definition. And if you look at this next chart, you can see that we've actually been in a seller's market here for quite a while, since about 2012. So this isn't a new situation that we're dealing with. It's been a seller's market really for the last decade. And it makes it tricky for buyers that are navigating the market and trying to find the right home. Housing inventory has continued to be lower year over year here. So you can see this trend since 2008, which was kind of the last peak. And everything is cyclical, right? So the housing market supply goes up and down, up and down, up and down. But the general trend line here is a downward inventory trend. The pandemic did heighten this, although we've seen, again, everything's cyclical, a little increase in inventory, and then it's dropped again. And we'll see as we head into the spring market, like we typically do, a little bit of an increase again, but overall, we still have very low inventory here. Now, people are buying houses, though. This is the positive thing. People are out looking at houses. So this chart is showing the number of showings, people going in and looking at homes before the pandemic as compared to right now. And this is 2021 data, but you can see that people are still looking at homes and they're still buying homes. So not only do we have low inventory, but the demand is so high that it's eating up the inventory even faster, right? Because more people are buying homes now than ever before. We're on a 15-year record high for home sales. So we have a situation where we have declining inventory and greater demand for those properties. So let's go back to our apples that we just talked about, right? What does it look like here in 2022? And this is kind of a joke, but it's kind of serious. we have so many buyers because of the heightened demand, and we have so much less inventory. So let's say we have 15 buyers and we have one apple. And that apple, it can have a bite out of it. And it doesn't even matter because people need that apple, right? They need a place to live, they need that house. So we are in not just a seller's market here, but some economists are really calling it an inventory crisis because the demand is so high and the number of houses available is so low. So we're going to get into our future slides here about where we go from here. What does this housing market look like going forward? But that's a little bit just on the basics of supply and demand and where we are right now in the spring of 2022.